Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Draw Cue.
Words. Will I go first, or do you want to go first?
You go ahead. You go first.
Well, I'm in the very unusual situation of being like swimming in words.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's good. Because last time we were supposed to record, either we planned to do two and you only had one, or we had to cancel. So I still have a word in hand, which is great, because that's, I feel supremely organised. I feel like basically like I have a savings account of words with all of the comforts and happiness that brings. But also a word, well, last night we were at our friends, they invited us over for tea, it was very nice, we had a lovely meal, we saw their excellent kids, we had a nice time. And we were talking about, like, I'm in Britain right now, so the Queen's still dead, and that's still all that the media is allowed to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's been like, we're on like day, I don't even remember, it feels like it's been forever. Maybe about a week and a half ago the Queen died, something like that. And and we've talked about this, about how it's a very complicated situation. Like first and foremost, I wish to point out that anyone who loses a dearly beloved relative, of course, has my condolences. I recognise that is a difficult and unpleasant situation, that people are grieving and sad and sorry about that whole thing. We all know what it is to lose somebody that we love, and it's terrible. Yeah. And so I don't in any sense wish to make light of the fact that there are people out there in that particular situation regarding the death of the Queen. Okay, she had a family, she had kids, she had grandchildren, all that stuff. However, the whole period of mourning, state funeral, collective madness thing that is going on, it's fucking weird. It's just fucking weird. And so it's very bizarre. If you live somewhere else in the world and you're not aware of what's been going on in Britain, the Queen died at Balmoral, which is in the north of Scotland. She wanted to die at Balmoral. She spent a lot of time at Balmoral. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And the plans for this was kind of leaked in the media a few years ago. There was Operation Unicorn, was the kind of plans for, if the Queen dies at Balmoral, here's what happens next, and this is how her body will be transported to London for her funeral, right? So that's what Operation Unicorn was. So last Sunday, despite the fact that I am not by any means a royalist, despite the fact that I, like, the sort of symbolic and the title and the institution of the monarchy don't really mean a great deal to me, but the Queen's body was being driven by basically the top of my road as part of Operation Unicorn. So what happened was there was this, she was put in a hearse in the coffin, although there is of course a conspiracy theory that she's not in the coffin, because everybody loves the conspiracy theory. Yeah. And then she drove down through Aberdeenshire and passed through Dundee and then to Edinburgh. Her body lay in state in Edinburgh for a couple of days, and then it was moved from Edinburgh to somewhere where it was flown down to London. And since then, the Queen has been lying in state in the Palace of Westminster. And you can go and join the queue to walk past the Queen's coffin, right? Now, for me, this was a situation where, like, to see the Queen's coffin, and I wasn't like, the main reason I went was because I had history FOMO. I told you about this. Yeah. I was totally like, I don't care about this. And then somebody said, oh, it's a historic moment, this will never happen again. And I was like, oh, maybe it is. Maybe I should go and stand out. And then my husband said, well, like, it's literally just at the top of the road. We should probably go. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So we did. And I was kind of curious as to what kind of people would be there and what it would be like. And then I was also a bit weirded out by the fact that when the caravan did, I say caravan, you know what I mean, the whole...
Yeah.
There were no actual caravans.
The procession.
That would have been brilliant. But when the whole procession did drive by, everyone stood and clapped. And
that's weird.
I didn't. And neither did my husband. We just kind of stood there and, you know, it drove past very slowly. And there was about, I don't know, there was maybe about 12 vehicles, something like that. Took a little while for them to pass by. And the whole time there's this sort of polite applause going on. And I was kind of like, oh, that's a bit weird. Like, I don't know what I expected. Before it had arrived, there was a man playing the bagpipes. That was quite stirring and rousing and all that kind of thing. But then he'd stopped and then the clapping happened. Also, almost, like, I'd say a good 60% plus of the people there had a camera or a mobile phone and they were either videoing or photographing the thing going past.
Right, yeah.
Also weird. Like, that's weird. Because... like, personally, if I had wanted to see a video of the Queen's coffin driving past, I would have stayed in my house.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing else on TV.
Yeah.
It's like they had a helicopter following that shit. It was right there. And I sort of felt like surely the point of this shebang is to, like, pay your respects rather than take a picture. But but whatever.
The applause thing, it's still sticking with me. Like, I would actually find impolite applause much more explainable.
Yeah, easier to understand.
Like, I could understand if you're genuinely unironically cheering, and if you are a member of a population for whom that is absolutely your right and privilege, the death of a monarch, that's one thing. But polite applause, like, what? Have any of these people ever been to a funeral?
Yeah,
like,
this is absolutely what I was thinking.
Like, you don't if you're going to a wake, you're either going to a real bang up one, which is great, which in which case by halfway through you can't find your hands, so you can't applaud anything. But or you go and you pay your respect. You don't go and just like hip hip hooray. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. So there's just been all these kinds of things going on for the past little while. And it's a sourse of endless bafflement to me. And so then this week, my husband sent me this wonderful Twitter thread that I'm going to read to you. I believe I've sent it to you already, but dear listener, here it is. It's from the Twitter user's called Curious Iguana. I don't know who they are. I don't know anything about them. I was sent this thread sort of in isolation. It says, "Right, everyone, I need to be serious for a moment, because the greatest thing that ever happened is happening right now. I don't particularly care either way about the Queen, but the queue is a triumph of Britishness. It's incredible. Just to be clear, I don't mean the purpose of the queue. I don't mean the outpouring of emotion or collective grief for the event at the end or around the queue or the people in the queue. I mean literally the queue. The queue itself. It's like something from Douglas Adams. It is the motherlode of queues. It is art. It is poetry. It is the queue to end all queues. It opened earlier today and it is already 2.2 miles long. They will close it if it gets to 5 miles. That's a queue that would take 2 hours to walk at a brisk pace. It is a queue that goes right through the entirety of London. It has toilets and water points and websites just for the queue. You cannot leave the queue. You cannot get into the queue further down. You cannot hold places in the queue. There are wristbands for the queue. Once you join the queue, you can expect to be there for days, but you cannot have a chair and a sleeping bag. There is no sleeping in the queue, for the queue moves constantly and steadily, day and night. You will be shuffling along at 0.1 miles per hour for days. There is a YouTube channel, Twitter feed and Instagram page, each giving frequent updates about the queue, because the back of the queue naturally keeps moving. To join the queue requires up-to-the-minute knowledge of where the queue is now. The BBC has live coverage of the queue on BBC One and a red button service showing the front bit of the queue. No one in their right mind would join the queue, and yet still they come. Oh, it'll only be until 6 a.m. on Thursday. We can take soup. At the end of the queue is a box. You will walk past the box slowly, but for no more than a minute. Then you will exit into the London drizzle and make your way home. Tell me this isn't the greatest bit of British performance art that has ever happened? I am giddy with joy. It's fantastic. We are a deeply, deeply mad people with an absolutely unshakable need to join a queue. It's utterly glorious. I genuinely cannot get over how accurate this is.
Yeah.
I cannot think of a single thing past, like, in an emergency, food and water, medical care, that I would queue for more than 6 hours. Also...
Yeah, that's a lot.
The thing about closing the queue when it gets to 5 miles, that's happened. It's actually been closed.
Really?
Because it's been 5 miles long.
Jeez.
Like, wowzers. So yeah, that is a thing that's going on just now. It's so surreal it's not even true. And it's the most British thing of all British things that's ever happened in my lifetime. So let's look at the word queue. Is basically what you're like, I'm sure there was a point to this whole tirade. Wasn't there a word in there somewhere?
We're going to get there. I knew it.
So, queue. Queue it's a really, really interesting word. I started off feeling like I wasn't terribly sure if it was going to come to anything or not. I've missed a bit out of my story because the first word that I was considering talking about today, with reference to the great madness going on in London, is the word catafalque.
Sorry, what?
Do you know what a catafalque is? I had never heard this. Yesterday, my friend who was trying to tell me about, apparently a guy was arrested for running at the catafalque, but she couldn't remember the word. She said, it's like a cross between cenotaph and catapult. And a catafalque is a decorated wooden framework supporting the coffin of a distinguished person during a funeral or while lying in state. And I just love when there is such a specific word for a thing that hardly ever happens. You know, like if words were kept in a cabinet somewhere, this one would have inches of dust on it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Other words would be like getting worn away to their very bones, but catafalque, that's in a dusty, dried out cabinet at the end of a very, very long corridor. So I do enjoy when we get to use words like this and take them out of their box and breathe a bit of life into them. So catafalque was my first thought. And there are historic catafalques. The Lincoln catafalque, which, as in Abraham, has been used since Abraham Lincoln died to support the deceased, various deceased famous people, up to and including Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But anyway, that's not the word I'm going to talk about. I just thought it was a fun one to throw in.
It's a wonderful one.
It's good, isn't it? Catafalque. So, queue doesn't mean what you think it means, or at least it didn't for a very long time. If you look it up in the OEV, which, you know, everybody should always, it's a good place to start. The first citation of the word dates from around about 1475, in the sense of double queue. However, a double queue was a band of parchment attached to a letter with seals hanging on the free ends. There's only one citation given for this particular usage, and it's an obsolete usage. So whenever people use double queues around about 1475, either they stopped doing it quickly or they decided that word was going to be used for other things. Interestingly, the first 6 usages of the word are either obsolete or very rare. The second one is given as, it says, perhaps a line of dancers. In other words, within the citation, which is from around about 1500, it says, quarrelling though queue go lightly, when I was a young man, so did I. They're not entirely sure. It may mean a line of dancers. it may mean something else. I love the idea of a citation that's so old and so without context that you can kind of guess at what the word means, but
Yeah.
you might not be getting there. The next sense is from heraldry. So first cited in about 1592, and of course, we've talked before about the peculiarities of heraldry and the very archaic language, which is kind of kept alive by this particular set of usages. So in heraldry, a queue is the tail of a beast. It's chiefly used in the term queue fourché, which means having a forked or double tail, to be double queued. So
Right.
this and the latest citation given for this is 1992. So, as is the case with a lot of the language that's used in heraldry, it hasn't changed much over the centuries, but the sense queue fourché is given all the way through the kind of history of it. So this forked tail or double tail. Next we get a long pleat of hair worn hanging down at the back from the head or from a wig, a pigtail, another historic or archaic usage of the sense of the word queue. We get all sorts of perukes, a word for a wig, as queue perukes and bag wigs. That's from 1724, which is quite lovely. And the largeness of the doctor's wig arises from the same pride with the smallness of the beau's queue. It's just such a lovely, lovely line of prose.
Yeah.
We then come to sense 5, a barrel or cask capable of holding approximately 1.5 hogsheads, which is 238 litres of wine or other liquid. Interestingly, it's now rare. It's not completely obsolete. The last citation given in the OED is from 1956, and it's they're talking about a queue of champagne. They have it as containing 216 litres, but originally 1.5 hogsheads, 238 litres. The first citation for that is from 1739, and it's about a queue of wine.
Wow.
We then have a support for the butt of a lance attached to the breastplate of a suit of armour. Another historical usage, first given in 1830, and then the latest citation in the OED is from 1986. However, it's from a book about medieval knighthood and chivalry. An oblong block of iron called a queue was screwed to the right side of the breastplate where it formed a lance rest.
Okay.
So that's a word that's...
I was going to ask how a word for mounted knights in armor jousting shows up in the mid 1800s, but that makes a lot more sense. There's a book about, yeah, super.
Yes, indeed. And then we get to sense 7. The thing that makes me laugh about this is it has sense 7A. The first thing it says is chiefly British. Yeah.
Oh, good sign.
Is so British. It's, I don't really know how much of the kind of British colonial history thing, I don't know how much of that has transferred to North America. Are you guys queuers?
I mean, to what I would call a non-obsessive extent. Like, we'll do it. It'll happen. Like, people would rather be in a line than not, but there's also it's not a cultural thing. It's not
like have you ever been to Germany?
Yes.
Have you ever tried to utilize a service or location that lots of other people are also trying to utilize?
Yeah, the concept of one at a time seems risky.
In Germany, it doesn't fucking happen.
That's what I mean. Like, if you're waiting for your turn,
it's just not a thing. It's just
like,
not a
similarly thing. in like getting on for such an otherwise organized country, the subway systems in Korea and Japan, like,
every
organized to a fault, but just absolute bedlam when you go and the doors open.
And so, like, as a Brit who's, I was raised in this country, I've lived in this country almost my whole life, and it's so ingrained in us that the effrontery of people who don't wait their turn just provokes this sort of like deep rage on a cellular level. It's almost impossible to explain. And you know that British people never get angry, of course. But if you want to make a British person angry on the inside, just jump the queue. That's all you need to do. And they will be fucking incandescent. Whether they respond in a way that reflects that rage or not, on the inside they are seething.
Yeah.
So, the definition given in the OED, a line or sequence of people, vehicles, etc., waiting their turn to proceed or to be attended to, especially in purchasing or receiving something. Frequently with a modifying word. It's also figurative and used in figurative contexts. It says the dominant sense outside North America is line. So, you would talk about a line of people in Britain, it's a queue.
Yeah.
And this particular usage is given first in 1796. The petty princes of Italy are, as the French say, en queue pour faire la paix. It is an excellent metaphor taken from a crowd who stand one behind another in order to be served in their turn, as the poor of Paris, for example, at the baker's. So this sense of standing in a line. We then get from Thomas Carlyle's account of the French Revolution in 1837, that talent of spontaneously standing in queue distinguishes the French people. Not if you're British. If you're British, going to France is also quite uncomfortable, but it has nothing on Germany. Germany's like,
right, yeah.
I don't know, there might be German people listening going, what is this crazy woman talking about? We absolutely queue, there is a system, it's all fine. It doesn't feel like that if you're like a tourist or an interloper. One of the comments on the Twitter thread that my husband, I sent it to him because it was really funny, and he said, I read some of the comments, and somebody said that I believe the Spanish method of queuing makes much better sense. What you would do is, like, let's say you're going to a doctor's waiting room and you arrive and there are like 20 people in the room already. What people do is, all they do, it's so simple, they just ask everybody in the room when they arrived until they get to the person who arrived last, and then they know that they're after them. I'm like, yeah, that is not a better system. However, if that's the system you're used to, then I suppose that seems like the best system.
I feel like that's a system for a slightly more gregarious and open to interacting with strangers in a confined setting culture than the British culture might be.
Yeah, that's not who we are. It's just not.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to be unfair, but that was my initial thought.
I don't. I mean, I'm making huge generalizations about countries and people from those countries, and about my own country and people from here too. That's the. I'm sorry if anyone is offended. Please don't be. That's not a really useful. It's not a useful response to somebody being offended, is it? Please. It
always works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Have you tried
know that thing you're feeling?
Being?
Could you maybe not feel it? That would be better.
Have you tried just not thinking that?
It's so much more convenient if you felt a different thing to the thing that you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on! I can't believe you never thought of that.
So we also have the sense of queuing as in computing a list of data items, commands, etc. Then the final sense given is, and these are both rather lovely. I'd never heard these usages before, but in music, a cue can be the tailpiece of a violin or other instrument. It's obsolete and rare. Oh. And it can also be used to describe the tail of a note, as in the part that is not the head.
Yeah.
So the round blob is the head, and the line is the cue, apparently, which is rather lovely. In terms of its etymology, pretty straightforward, however not that straightforward. A bit like a cue itself, in fact. So
right.
Etym Online points out that the late 15th century citation, the band attached to a letter with the seals dangling on the free end. And this is taken pretty straightforwardly from the French word queue, which means a tail.
Right.
Which makes a whole lot of sense. A pigtail, the thing hanging down from the letter. And this comes from Old French queue, C-U-E, queue, C-O-E, or queue as we spell it now, Q-U-E-U-E. The last 5 letters are the last 4 letters are, of course, redundant.
Just
You
silent.
spell it with 1 letter.
It's a Q with 4 silent letters after it.
Yeah, God help us. In the 12th century, Q was also used to mean penis, as in tail. And it comes from Latin coda, which also, identical to the Italian word coda, used in a musical sense, the tail at the end of a piece of music.
Last bit, yeah.
Yeah, so this makes sense. All of these ultimately come from Latin cauda or coda, C-A-U-D-A, which quite simply means tail. And Etymonline talks about the various senses that are listed within the OED, listing that I talked about there. And it also refers you to coda. And in coda, things got interesting for me personally. So coda's given as a passage added to a musical composition for the purpose of bringing it to a conclusion. You can see that it's tail. And it says here, from Latin cauda, tail of an animal which is of uncertain origin. Interesting. Now, Etymonline then states, Devan traces it to Proto-Italic cauda with a K, meaning part or tail, from Pi, kehud, meaning cleaved or separate, from Pi root ku, spelled K-H-U. He writes, since words for piece or part are often derived from to cut or to cleave, the tail may have been referred to as the loose part of the animal. Very interesting. Kind of makes sense. I get it. So I had questions. First of all, I didn't know who Devan was. Secondly, I wanted to find out more about the pie root, because we do love a helping of pie around about these parts.
Sure do.
So, of course, I took myself off to the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Centre, Indo-European Lexicon of Pie, Etymon and IE Reflexes. I'll just take a little break here. Whew.
Yeah.
Oh, exhausted. And I went there to look up the pie root listed by Etymonline. And I couldn't find it. It was not there. K-H-U. And I thought, well, the ways that pie roots are written and spelled vary from researcher to researcher. So quite the pie kind of dictionary, if you like, if it's even problematic to discuss Proto-Indo-European roots by terms such as dictionaries, because there are several big texts that exist. So the Pokorny text, which is what the University of Texas at Austin has based their Indo-European lexicon on, seems to use particular conventions when writing and rendering pie roots that you don't necessarily see in other places. So the next place that I went to looking for my pie root was the American Heritage Dictionary, which has a wonderful appendix of pie roots.
It does.
That's
fantastic.
And if you've never looked at this, which why would you? That's what Ryan and I are here for. But it kind of lists them more in a sort of a dictionary sense. The University of Texas Austin site is a little bit more tricky to navigate than a standard dictionary, because it's trying to present a lot more information than just meaning or dates. So that's fair enough. But I couldn't find it there either. So the next question that I had was about Deval. That's spelled D-E capital V-A-A-N, Devan, sorry, and discovered that Devan is Michel Devan, who is an etymological scholar, linguist, who wrote an etymological dictionary of Latin in 2000, published in 2008.
That's right. That's who it is.
And so I looked this up, because what a wonderful time to be alive if you love information. Here it is right here on the interwebs.
Yeah.
And I found the entry for cauda, tail, and Devan very clearly states that the forms caudeus and caudatum suggest that cauda could refer to a certain tail-formed plant, which is unsurprising. Since words for piece or part are often derived from to cut or to cleave, the tail may have been referred to as the loose part of the animal. So this is exactly as Etymonline has. Thus, cauda can be derived from the same root as the verb kudo. The diphthong could hardly have been formed on the base of kudo or its derivatives. As Vine 2006 points out, cauda and caudex may derive from the unmetathesized variant of the root ku, hence Kehud. Incidentally, this would prove that the dental involved with D and not DH, since the latter would yield Latin cauba. And my little brain exploded at this point. First of all, I should point out that the ku, that etymology rendered as KHU, is rendered here in Devan's etymological dictionary as asterisk KH with a subscript 2, then a U, then a dash.
Oh.
The next part, the formation that it's believed that cauda comes from, asterisk KE, H with a subscript 2, U dash D. So by this point, to say I was out of my depth would be just a vastly, I've forgotten the opposite of a hyperbole, but it would be one of those. So I'm like, okay, but surely I can find this root. It must exist somewhere. So I did a little bit more digging into the Pokorny Index from the University of Texas at Austin. And I thought, well, I can't find it using the KH or the KE list. Maybe I can find it in terms of its meaning. So I had a look for the word cleave and discovered that there is a root glube, Gleubh, which gives us English words. It means to cut or divide. It gives us English words like cleave, clever, cleft, clove, as in a piece of garlic, glyph, as in an ornamental vertical groove in a Doric frieze, hieroglyphic, and all of these words that relate to cleaving or splitting or drawing things along lines. But that doesn't give us any further insight into cauda, and cauda is not included in fact, there are no Latin roots given, Latin cognates given in that particular list. So I thought, well, it does also seem to indicate, and I looked in various other places, some of which said that the root KHU meant tail. So I looked that up too in the Pokorny Index, and I discovered something very lovely, but it doesn't give us any further insight into the word Q. I discovered that the Proto-Indo-European root for the word tail is ers. ERS. Tail, arse, rump, backside. It made me so happy to think that people who were speaking languages that didn't even know they were languages, that may or may not even really have existed, that have only been reconstructed by a massive, massive amount of incredibly detailed scholarship, those guys still called an arse an arse. I liked that a lot.
That is very nice.
And ultimately, when it comes down to finding the end of the Q, I just can't do it. I need to learn a bit more about Proto-Indo-European, because ultimately I couldn't find the start and I couldn't find the end. And at this point, I thought that was in fact entirely appropriate. I don't know about you, but I have certainly joined queues without knowing if I was in the right place, or indeed if that was even the end of a queue. I was recently at a gig where I joined a queue for quite a long period of time before discovering that it wasn't the real queue. The end of the real queue was several meters beyond where I thought I was standing in the right place.
Right.
So queue. It's a little bit of a mystery. We've got a clear indicator as to where it might have come from, but we can't really go any further than that unless we want to spend a whole lot of time wading through a whole lot of things that we may not necessarily understand.
Yeah.
And that sounds to me like about the most appropriate thing I could have found out about this word if I'd been trying.
Yeah.
My other absolutely favourite thing about researching this word was that the OED the OED gives various different forms of the word, because of course words change over time. And in late Middle English, the word Q was spelled QWEW.
Oh.
And frankly, that's the way I want to spell it from now on.
Yeah.
Quoo.
Quoo. Let's join the
love it.
quoo. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
The queue.
That's neat. Yeah, the tail thing. Like, as soon as you said the tail and got into the heraldry side of things, I was like, yeah, okay, I could see how that would, the squiggly line that kind of
sure.
meanders sometimes, goes here and there. It's funny how many little points of contact our words have today, which is kind of cool.
Interesting.
Because my word today is draw.
Ooh.
And the passing of the Queen has drawn attention. It definitely drew a crowd. It drew a line through Scotland as it went from Balmoral to Edinburgh. And this word came to me because I did, well, exactly that, like kind of thinking about different ways it's used metaphorically. And, you know, you draw a weapon, you can draw a bath, a crowd, a car, you draw a picture, you can draw criticism, you can draw attention to yourself, you can draw something out, something can draw near to you. Like, there's...
I'm thinking again about what I was saying about catafalque. You know, if that's in a dusty cabinet way at the back, then draw's got a big old drawer. Maybe even its own room.
It probably has its own, at least its own filing cabinet, because the OED entry for draw, and so you know how it goes, the OED is the OED because it is very meticulous with its discrimination between senses of the words.
Yes. Are there thousands of them? I love it.
Has 91 distinct senses listed. I haven't found one with more than that yet, I don't think.
That's awesome.
It's immense.
Yeah. I feel like a bell is ringing somewhere. Ding, 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 ding. You found it. Woo, yeah. Well done.
What's your prize? Goes and goes and goes.
91.
So obviously we can't go through all of them because that would be madness.
What are you talking about? I demand completion.
91, go. We'll do a quick whirlwind tour, and I've tried to organize these by like most modern back of some of the. So, draw as a style of poker comes in at 1850.
Okay.
Which is interesting because to draw a card, you draw a card shows up by 1772. Oh,
that is nice.
The expression to draw the line, as in to set a limit on something, is in English by 1793.
Okay.
You could draw a crowd by the 1580s. The draw of a ship, as in the amount of water it needs because it displaces X amount of water and runs at a certain depth. A ship's draw, so that shows up by the 1550s. And around the same time, you get the sense of to draw something out, as to extend it,
right,
prolong it or whatever. The other one, so we're in the early 1400s now, and it is a verbal use, kind of, but it exists only in compound noun form, and that is to draw a bridge. And of course, a drawbridge is very common, and that's still a word, and people know what that means. But you wouldn't often hear a bridge being drawn or a drawn bridge.
Sure.
But that's 1400s. Drawing blood was an expression around 1400.
Ooh.
You could draw lots or straws circa 1300. The sense of drawing a line or a shape with a pen or a pencil or some sort of writing implement was around 1300 that shows up. To draw arrows, as in to pull back the string of a bow, getting ready to fire, is from the late 1200s.
This is so cool.
And in the late 12th century, so in the 1180s-ish, we get citations for to draw a weapon, as in to unsheath a sword and prepare for use and stuff. And like I say, that's, what is that, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that's maybe 10 or 15 examples of the 91 senses that are used in the OED. And I cannot stress it enough, there are almost 100 senses used.
I'm so excited to go and look at this dictionary entry. You
will have to.
Is that a normal thing for a human to say. I mean, surely on an etymology podcast, that's a normal
here it's
thing.
normal. Yeah.
Listen,
Normal is relative.
last night I discovered that I'm not the only person in the world. I was so relieved to discover this, because I just thought it was just another one of those things that makes me a bit of a weirdo that I'd probably never tell anybody else about. But my friend has a small daughter who goes to school and learns maths, and my husband is a maths teacher. And he was talking about how she's had a bit of a struggle with her maths, so they've been trying hard to help her out, and they've been going over things like times tables with her. And then my friend said that he has got favourites within the times tables. He's got favourite sums. And I was like, oh my God, not just me. Like, first of all, the 9 times table is the best one.
Oh, hands down.
That's
Absolutely.
my personal favourite. Yep. And so my friend's like, for some reason, I love 3 sevens. That's just an awesome 3 sevens or 21. That's a really good one. I was like, dude, I have a favourite in every single times table, pretty much, apart from the 5 and the 10, because they're really boring.
They are boring, yeah.
But in every other times table, there is I don't know, do you call them factors? No, I'm obviously not any sort of maths person, but I've got a favourite within the table somewhere. So yeah, I can't wait to go and look at that dictionary entry, and I have favourite times table numbers. So.
Yeah, we're all learning a lot today.
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah. So. The earliest, so we're back at drawing a weapon in the late 1100s.
And that's the first one, yeah? Drawing a weapon is the earliest sense.
Well, it's the earliest of that list. No, it goes back further than that for sure. It started out as a verb.
Okay.
So it was a verb that eventually got nouned. I think it's fair to say the noun is fairly less common.
Yeah.
Than the verb to this day, but that's how it started as well. So one of the earliest OED citations, and it's hard because the OED gets to a point where they just go, it's Old English. And
like, meh.
Like, if you ever looked at an OED entry, the citations are arranged chronologically from oldest to youngest, and there's a smattering of, if there's available, there's, between 4 and 7 different instances spanning the centuries or decades or what have you. But the earliest ones, if you're dealing with anything prior to, say, 1100, it just puts a capital O and a capital E and says, that's enough for you.
Yeah, this is no longer my business. Because everything's muddy and murky,
and it's Old English, deal with it. And so, which is fair, because it's kind of like the OED's purpose is to trace the English language, and once you get to that point, you're almost getting out of English.
Yeah.
Like
and you have to draw the line somewhere. And
eventually the madness must stop. 5 miles long, that's the OED's Old English point. It's like, no, we're done now. We're done now. So there's a couple of these. This one is from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which sounds a little bit like a Brexit-era small-town newspaper. But is in fact a dusty tome on the old English.
The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is way more than a dusty tome. It's pretty awesome. But it does sound like a Brexit-era newspaper, yeah.
Yeah. So the earliest, the sense from this citation is as follows. Transitive, especially of a draft animal or engine, to cause a plow or vehicle, etc., to advance by pulling it, to pull something along.
Ah.
So that's where we get it's one of the earliest ones. The other one of the other ones is maybe the most specific thing I've seen being given its own sense, because boy, so here's the OED quote. Transitive, to drag something, especially along or against the ground, specifically of a person or animal, to drag or trail one's own entrails along after being disemboweled.
As in hung, drawn, and quartered.
Mercifully then goes obsolete, which is
hanged, drawn, and quartered.
Hanged, yeah. Hung, drawn, and quartered is another thing, and at least you got something going for you. But
so that's what the drawing part of
Yep.
being drawn. Ah.
And drawn, if you're drawn in court, it's the pulling apart of limbs as a torture mechanism. There's to draw a criminal was to basically drag him behind a horse to the execution block or gallows or whatever.
Super brutal.
Yeah.
Wowzers.
So yeah, there's a lot of these. There's a handful of them in the Old English category.
And this all makes so much sense. Like, how do you draw with
as soon
a
as you get to
pencil?
that point, you're like,
drag
okay,
it across the paper.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
So it
so
all comes
cool.
down to this pulling thing. Now, etymology wise, and exactly, and you draw breath by pulling air into your lungs. You draw a
Yeah.
crowd by pulling them out of their house and into whatever place you're doing a thing. Draw a card by pulling it out of the deck. There's all these. They all make so much sense. It's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
When you get to that pulling or dragging origin. Then it gets murky, and this is sort of the same with Q. You just kind of, you're following this fairly logical, fairly rational little trail or Q, and then eventually it just sort of stops.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience of driving along a back road or something, or walking along a trail in a forest or through a field or something like that. And there's a trail. You're on a road or a trail, and then you're just not
there anymore.
And it's sort of sometimes, especially if you're walking in the woods or something, and eventually you notice, but it takes a little bit, and you're like, wait, hold on. There was a thing. I was on a thing, and now I'm not. And now I'm just here. Like, what? I remember I used to work for this tiny newspaper in Central Ontario, and I was on my way to try to find somebody that I had to interview for a story. But out there's a lot of back roads. Everyone lives out in the middle of nowhere, and fine, fair enough. So I'm driving. It's about 12 years ago, so GPS was not all the way a thing yet, in a convenient Google Maps kind of sense. But not that Google Maps is much good out there anyway. But I was driving along, and eventually, I was on this road, and it wasn't. Don't picture a boulevard. It was just, 2 tracks through the woods, and then all of a sudden it was 2 tracks ending at a gigantic boulder the size of my car, and that was it.
Oh man!
And then I was just there, and I stopped. I was like, processing. Okay.
There's nothing quite like that particular fear either, is there? In the moment when you realise that the thing is not a thing anymore.
It's just done.
I'm out here alone.
Stop. Well, you see, I thought that, and then I heard a chainsaw start up, so I left, and
that's not a reassuring.
Sure wasn't. I was like,
I'm sure
wow.
if I listen, I'll hear some signs of civilization. Oh, I'm sure I'll be getting back in my car right now.
Chainsaw nearby, yeah. Because I was driving for a while before I got to that boulder, and then I was like, I am well and truly remote now, and there's a chainsaw. Anyway, off I go.
There are definitely etymological trails to follow that end in the equivalent of a boulder and a chainsaw.
Yeah, and that's kind of this one, because you're humming along, you're going back through, you're getting to pull and draw and drag and stuff, and in fact it ultimately does share an origin with the Old English sort of a word for drag, so it's they're siblings.
Yeah.
Etymology wise, the OED puts it as the origin as a word inherited from Germanic, which seems perfunctory, but it's at the beginning.
About 80% of English.
Yeah, it's a broad category, and it has a very extensive etymology section on this. A lot of it around the different sort of forms and pronunciations, sure, and shifts and stuff, as verbs tend to in the OED. Yeah. Like, the etymology section of verbs is almost always much bigger than anything else, because it's going into like tenses and especially if they're irregular verbs, where it's, why is it I will draw but I drew, like, how does that happen, and that kind of thing. So it's extensive, but ultimately it can be summed up in a word inherited from Germanic. If you go to Etym Online, now this is another similarity with Q. Etym Online traces the word to a Proto-Indo-European root, dreg, D-H-R-E-G-H. which it says is basically to drag or to pull or to scrape or whatever. But and then I went from Edam online to learn more. I went to the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Center Indo-European Lexicon Pokorny Master Pi Edema, and it didn't have that. And then I went to, as you did, the American Heritage Dictionary Indo-European Roots Appendix, and it didn't have it. So it was in neither of those places, and neither was, like, it was weird because if you did a, Control F and search for the word draw, like try to reverse engineer it.
Yep, this is what I was doing.
I got several, so on the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Center Indo-European Lexicon Pokorny Master Pi Edema, there were 3 different roots that have the word draw in the sort of English gloss column.
Yeah.
But none of them were right. Like, so one was to draw scoop or ladle, one is to draw water, scoop or ladle, and the other is to draw lots. But they don't, so it's describing something that the description of which involves the word draw, but not the word draw itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to tell you something awesome that I completely forgot to say when I was talking about Q. There are 2 things that I forgot about, even though I had notes on both of these things. One is that coda is used in English because it refers to a beautiful anatomical term. You know how I love those. Coda equina is the bundle of spinal nerves where it emerges from the spinal column, just at the upper part of the lumbar spine, and they kind of drape down over the pelvis, this bundle of spinal nerves. Cauda equina means a horse's tail.
Horse's tail, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So that was a little thing. But this one, like, hold on to something, Ryan. Brace yourself.
Okay.
Because
I'm excited.
In my in my delvings into, surely to God, the Pi people can agree on something somewhere, and I'll actually be able to find this root journey.
Right.
I discovered a website called indo-european.info.
Oh.
And when you go to this site, here is what it says.
Okay.
It is a PDF document called A Practical Guidebook for Modern Indo-European Explorers. Part 1, Lessons 1 to 42. There is a charming drawing of people from ye olde past holding hands and dancing in a circle. And then what follows, there's a short foreword and an introduction. And essentially, as far as I can see, this document is a course on, it's like a primer on learning to speak Indo-European.
Oh.
It has
What?
The first lesson gives you translations for the sentences, I am a tailor, you are a potter, he is a cook, she is a cook, it is a tree. It goes into I am, you are, he, she is, I and you. It looks at this masculine, this feminine, and this neuter. And it gives you translations, it gives you vocabulary, there are sections where you can fill in the words. It's like a French textbook, but it's for Indo-European. Now, first of all,
I'm intrigued, but go on.
First of all, wow, you would not believe the amount of work that's gone into the production of this document. Every lesson has a little bibliography, and they are extensive. This is I can't even imagine how many hours this must have taken. There is a section on pronunciation, which I got briefly very excited about because we don't know how to pronounce Proto-Indo-European roots ever, and they're always spelled with lots of weird letters. But if you wanted to say, for example, my name is Wesumaros in Indo-European, this is the place you would come to find out how to do that. It is
interesting.
Wild.
Huh.
Absolutely wild. So
That's
when
very neat.
as I was thinking to myself, I need to learn more about Proto-Indo-European, I was not expecting that someone has already put together a textbook to actually teach me how to speak it, should I so wish to do so. But they have. Isn't the internet wonderful?
Interesting. I have that's very exciting. But I also have questions about, like,
Oh, so many questions.
yeah, like maybe there's a little bit of Esperanto happening where it's just like, you know what, nobody knows what this stuff is.
Quite
you know what we could
possibly.
do? We could just do the thing.
We could just do the thing.
But yeah, that's very cool. I'm gonna have to look that up because that's cool.
Yeah.
And maybe it has something that would help out with draw, because the etymological boulder at the end of the road mystery kind of keeps going, because so I'm just going to read this paragraph from
Cool.
which is from the OED's lengthy etymology section on draw. It says, the Germanic base has no clear relations within Germanic and no secure cognates in other Indo-European languages. A connection has been suggested with the Germanic base of trek, verb, and also with, among others, Latvian dragat, to destroy, to crush, Russian dergat, I don't know how to pronounce that, to pull or tug, and doroga, road, ancient Greek, I think it's trekein, to run, and classical Latin trahere, to pull, drag, but most of these are now thought to be unrelated. In fact, all of the suggestions pose seemingly insurmountable phonological or semantic problems. An origin of non-Indo-European substrate language is perhaps more likely. A similar Indo-European origin has also been proposed for classical Latin trahere, with which the word may after all be related at a substrate level. End quote.
I hate that.
So, like, and it's, yeah, because what that then becomes is the boulder at the end of the road, through which there's a tiny hole, through which you can just barely make out an entirely other world that you've never considered before.
Yeah, that is a good metaphor.
And it's like, holy, I just sort of looked at that for a bit and went, yeah, okay, that's where I stop, because you have to draw a line somewhere. And, but it also made me think that this is kind of one of those, like, there's been like dog was one, log was another one, where we just kind of, the Douglas Adams metaphor of the whale falling out of, like, appearing in the sky and hurtling towards the earth, and just sort of deciding that the big wide place underneath was probably called ground, because it just made sense that that's what the word for that
Just
thing would sound like.
The sort of word.
Yeah. And so eventually, we're at that place where someone just, I mean, all words are just noises we've all agreed upon, but deeper than that, this is just a basic noise. Okay, now this noise means this. When I pull this animal carcass along the ground, that's called dragging.
This is the
because
noise.
it's just the word I made when someone said, "What are you doing?" and I made that noise, and they, like, so
Yeah, we're all just out here making noises.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And so
That's super cool.
yeah. So anyway, it's not the most satisfying conclusion to, frankly, a pair of words that we've ever had, but
I kind of
it's
feel
not bad.
like that's etymology. That's sort of, and it's satisfying to know where you're going, and it's super satisfying to find out where you've come from, and all the cool little links along the way. But ultimately, until those lazy ass scientists get around to coming up with a time machine, this is the best that we've got. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, there's cue and draw.
Cue and draw.
We should make reference to the fact, actually, because I'm not sure if our pre-show chat is going to make it anywhere or see the light of day, but I would like to offer apologies to everyone who's been very patiently sitting around and going, are they dead? Have they stopped?
Yeah.
Do we get more stuff?
Very patient.
And yeah, this summer, for me at least, has been, I was talking to Amy earlier, and maybe you've already heard this, or maybe I'll cut this bit out and keep that bit in, but this summer has been crazy. So we've got our Ukrainian friends still staying with us, working sort of the standard 9-to-5 office job, Monday to Friday. I'm in a band, and we have been busier than I've ever been musically ever, because we've played every single weekend at least once, which means Sunday morning, like last night I got to bed at 3-ish. And so after like a 12-hour day and a 5-hour show, so there's sort of one day of the week where there's nothing else happening, and most of that's just me recovering. And so the usual difficulties of coordinating transatlantic chats has been further compounded by the fact that I have absolutely no free time whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so it was just one of those, like, the week flies by and then it's Sunday and it's like, oh, I've done nothing and also I need to sleep. And that happened several times, and all of a sudden it's been a month and a half since we've recorded an episode. So appreciate all the people just dropping emails saying, like, hope you're okay, miss you, but, you know, hope you guys are good, because that's very much appreciated. And ideally things are starting to slow down on a couple different fronts, so ideally we're kind of more or less back on track. I even have a word kind of in the chamber as well now.
Ooh, exciting.
So whenever we do this next time, hopefully next weekend, we'll be able to just kind of have at her. But yeah, so apologies for the delay. Consider it a summer mini series of hiatuses, and hopefully we're back on track now.
And for my part, I am still trying to pass this fucking exam. It's not done yet. It's not done yet.
Oh.
All the sighs. Wow. But
Yeah.
it will be soon, I hope, maybe, possibly. Turns out this shit is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe Pilates, man.
I also I'm sort of at this, like, where is my life going? Where has it gone? There's been conversations that Ryan and I have had where we're like, oh, we should definitely get together on Sunday. And then you'll get to like Tuesday and be like, oh shit, there was a Sunday in the middle.
Yeah, Sunday's gone now. It happened.
Yeah. So yeah, many thanks, as Ryan has said, and thank you for your concerns. We will, we'll not leave you out there in the etymological cold. There's always at least a boulder at the end of the road. We can huddle around that together.
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, many thanks to the people who keep on listening, even when there's long breaks between the things to listen to. And hopefully keep on enjoying the times that we do get together and chat about this stuff. Yeah. Here's to more words and more chats and more free time, because that is also a thing that we both need to have in our lives.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.